So I want to suggest 5 things that you should at least consider doing once a year to your lawn. And I think if you'll do these 5 things, you will have a better looking lawn. Now, not all of them are mandatory, not all of them are of equal value, but these are 5 things you should at least consider. Today's video is sponsored by Graham Spray Equipment. I do weed control and fertilization for a living, and the spray rig on the back of my truck comes from Graham Spray Equipment in Douglasville, Georgia. If you need a spray rig for your business, go to grahamse.com or give those guys a call. One thing that might be most relevant at the time of this video or coming up soon that you should do to your lawn, or at least consider doing, is to bag your clippings. Now, I deal with warm season grasses. My yard is primarily Bermuda grass, so I have a little bit of zoysia, maybe a little bit of St. Augustine. But particularly on these Bermuda yards and maybe the zoysia, let me show what I'm talking about and talk to you through why I bag the clippings, why I do it one time instead of all the time, and why you may just do it never. But let's show you what we're talking about. So this is a dormant Bermuda grass lawn. We got down to about 10 degrees last night, and it's just totally dormant. Now, the difference between dormant and dead, if you're used to cool season grasses and they're green all the time, this is not dead, it's just dormant. But with a dormant lawn, or basically a lawn that's asleep, if you want to think of it in those terms, there is still a little bit of green down there somewhere. Well, maybe not much at all on this particular yard, especially on Bermuda. And that's one interesting thing, you can actually spray glyphosate on dormant Bermuda because there's almost no green. But what's going to happen this spring, at least hopefully, is we get rid of all this dormant grass. This is not going to turn green again. I mean, is that ever going to be green again? No, I don't think so, unless we paint it. But it can put up new growth from down here. And so what we want to do is get rid of this dormant grass and start warming the soil, warming the roots, and it puts up new growth. Now, I had somebody ask me the other day about like when to do that. Should I do that in February if I'm in Alabama? Okay, I probably wouldn't do it in February, and the reason that I wouldn't do it in February is if you do it then and we get a hard freeze, you know, maybe you're making a little bit more susceptible to winter damage because you're taking away a little bit of a layer of protection. And if you do it in February, I'm not convinced that it's going to turn green any sooner than if you waited until March. So for me, where I live in Alabama, I would say, you know, March time frame. What I don't want to do is get rid of the dormant grass and then it gets really cold and could potentially cause damage. Now, why do I say bag it? Because in this situation, I've got acreage, so I'm not bagging it, but if I had a little yard, if I was gonna bag the yard, that would be the time to do it. And maybe even more so with a zoysia lawn. If you've got all these clippings and you're just trying to get it down low and let the new growth come up, then what are you gonna do with all that? So if you just mulch it, it's just gonna be sitting there. Now in the summertime with warmer weather, it starts breaking down faster, and yes, it can provide nutrients back to the soil. But this time of year, I mean, you basically just want to get rid of all that dormant grass. And so if there was a time to bag it, I would say do that. Now on the zoysia lawns, sometimes if on those, the clippings take even longer to break down. And so if you don't bag it, or maybe even possibly dethatching it once in a while, then you end up with a situation where you got a lot of dead material down there near the soil, and that's called thatch, and that could create some issues over the long term. So if you're going to bag it, do it that first cut of the year. If you want to keep bagging it, fine. If you don't want to, then don't. And if you don't bag it at all, like I don't because I got too much grass, then I'm still trying to kind of get it down lower and let that sunlight warm the roots so that I can get early green spring up. Sorry, I said that wrong. An early spring green up. Now, I don't know if that was more geared toward warm season lawns. It may have been, but maybe the next one could be even more so geared toward cool season lawns, and that is once a year doing a core aeration, or there's now even liquid aeration products out there, and one of those I could potentially be testing this year. We'll see on my yard. I'm curious about that. So think about that. If your soil's real compacted, or if we go with the cool seed lines in that situation, you know, a lot of times they're going to do it in the fall and they're going to aerate and overseed at the same time. You can get the soil kind of broken up, decompacted, and then also putting out the seed to help it thicken back up the lawn. Now, with our warm season grasses, we don't typically overseed, but if the soil has been compacted, then pulling out those core plugs can help make it not as compacted where you're kind of helping the nutrient cycle, getting the water down there to the roots and maybe even the airflow, you know, just whatever the life cycle of a plant is. You don't want the compacted soil because you're restricting the nutrients from getting down there to the roots. So core aeration, something to consider once a year. It doesn't necessarily fix a terrible yard. If you just have a terrible yard and you go aerate it, I mean, it's not going to make it not a terrible yard. But if you have a nice yard and the soil's a little compacted, then you aerate it, it could elevate the yard to some degree. A third thing I want to mention you should do at least once a year, in my opinion, maybe because that's what I do for a business, is fertilize the lawn. And we talked about letting the clippings go, and that can provide some nutrients, but at the end of the day, the yards that we get fertilizer typically are going to have a boost in their health and overall appearance of that lawn. So you say, Jason, don't you need to fertilize more than one time? Well, that depends on what fertilizer you're using and to some degree what kind of grass you have. So for our warm season lawns, typically we're going to start fertilizing late in the spring, maybe April or May time frame. And if I use a slow release fertilizer, I could, depending on the rate I put it out at and the type of fertilizer I use, but I could just fertilize one time and it could feed that lawn for the entire growing season. Now, if you had a cool season lawn and you're just trying to get it to, feed it for a couple of months in the spring, then maybe come back and fertilize it again in the fall, maybe we want to fertilize twice. And with a warm season lawn, you can fertilize multiple times. But I'm just saying, if you do it one time during the growing season, April, May, and for those with cool season lawns, perhaps earlier than that, it can greatly benefit the health. So neglecting that is overall going to affect the appearance of your turf. And I'm not saying just fertilize one time, but I'm saying fertilize at least one time. Before I get to the fourth and fifth thing, I do want to mention the Lawn Care Life Conference. If you hadn't signed up and you want to come, go ahead and sign up. Go to lawncarelife.com and there will be a link for the conference. We've got a lot of great speakers this year, great prizes, great sponsors. It's near Birmingham, Alabama. It's a Friday night, Saturday evening. There's also a VIP option, and love to have you there. So go to lawncarelife.com, click on the conference link. If you want to come and there's an issue with getting here, financial, other reasons, then message me and let me see what I can do to help you out. One thing you want to do on your lawn at least once a year, I would recommend twice a year, but at least once a year would be spray a pre-emergent herbicide on your lawn. So if I had a horrible looking yard, I'm picturing where I live in the South, got a Bermuda grass yard, it's been neglected for 10 years, crabgrass for days, this just going for the world record crabgrass population. And I spray a pre-emergent, something like prodiamine is what's commonly used, in January or February. Again, I'm talking Alabama time frame, adjust as you need to. If I did that, I mean, it would make a world of difference on that lawn. I'm talking about controlling possibly 100% of crabgrass, but easily 95% in my mind. I mean, just past experience. I can't make any guarantees, but it's unbelievable. And then if you go back and you do that previous tip of fertilizing the yard, and now that Bermuda grass starts filling in all those bare spots, the transformation you could get in 1 year is unbelievable. What happens is, in my opinion, people, it makes me mad every year. I see it in TV commercials will start advertising some big box weed killer product about March and April, which might be fine for some areas, but where I live, that's too late to be spraying your pre-emergent. You're already too late. If you had a yard full of crabgrass, you're going to have another yard full of crabgrass because you did it too late. It's not to mean the product didn't work. It means they did advertise it too late. But people aren't thinking about their yards in February when it would be helpful. Again, that's with us warm season grasses in the South. So doing that makes a huge difference once a year. Now, for me, I want to do it again in the fall because there's cool season weeds that germinate in the fall. So I might spray my yard in February, January, February time frame for the warm season weeds and crabgrass, things of that nature. Spray it again September, October time frame for the cool season weeds like Poa annua, henbit, hairy bittercress, all these things that I'm seeing in my yard about the time I'm filming this video. So do it twice a year would be better, but once a year can make a monumental difference. I've said before, most important treatment of the year. I truly believe that, because if you don't do that year after year after year after year with a particular Bermuda grass yard, And that's not the only one, but your yard's so covered in weeds that it's hard for the grass to compete. The fifth thing I want to mention that I do to my yard once a year, sometimes more, but I spray a growth regulator. Now the one I've been using is called Podium, and there's another one out there, same chemical, I believe it's called T-Nex, and these are great. Now what they do is they basically make your grass not stop growing, but they take some of the energy it's using to grow and they make it grow more laterally instead of vertically. Basically, it reduces the amount of mowing you have to do. I would say reduces it, practically speaking, by about 50%. Now, it works for about a month, reduce it for about a month. So, you know, ideally, if you had warm season grass, you get a lot of rain, it's growing like crazy in June, July, and August, September, you might could do it once a month during those busy growing seasons. If you had cool season lawns growing like crazy in April or May, then do it then. You know, whenever it's really growing. I don't want to use it in October when my grass is slowing down, not growing that much. So there's also growth regulator for shrubs. If I had a row of holly bushes at my house that required trimming and just were a real pain to deal with, or then I would look into some kind of growth regulator for shrubs and spray that once a year, because I don't like trimming shrubs, just to be honest with you. I thought this video would give you some ideas of some products you can use to help your lawn out. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. Also, you want to get a weed control and fertilization like me, go to lawncarelife.com. That's where you'll find the Weed Control and Fertilization Academy. Also, check out Lawn Care Life Conference while you're there. We'll see you guys in the next video.